It's time for some Straight Talk. You have their unlimited plan. So why do you keep running out of high-speed data? Never run out again with Straight Talk's new Ultimate Unlimited plan. Get all the 4G LTE data you want, all high speed, and all for just $55 a month on America's largest, most dependable 4G LTE networks, only from Straight Talk Wireless, only at Walmart.
Video typically streams at DVD quality. Please refer always to the latest terms and conditions of service at straighttalk.com.
Archangels, ghosts, and Bigfoot. Oh my. It's just another night for Supernatural Girls. Real stories, real answers to life's biggest supernatural mysteries. And now for another exciting interview with paranormal experts from this world and others. Here's your host, paranormal researcher Patricia Baker, on the one, the only Supernatural Girls.
Welcome, everyone, to another exciting episode of Supernatural Girls Radio. I'm your host, Patricia Baker, and I'm here with my co-host, PK, all the way from sunny and hot Tucson.
That's right.
How are you, PK?
Melting I feel like I'm put on a spit.
And you see, PK is so devoted to the show. She doesn't even run the air conditioning because it makes noise.
Right. That's right.
We want our listeners to have very, very good sound from us. So she is roasting away in her office tonight.
That's
for your benefit, everybody.
Like they really care. As long as they've got it cool, they're fine.
That's right. So lots going on in the world. We've had quite a tragedy over there in the UK. What a shame. Again,
that is a shame.
Our prayers go out to the friends, families, and everybody who's suffering as a result of that horrific act.
So mentioned also that Ariana Grande, her mother, was in the first row and stepped right up to the plate and was helping everybody around her to get them protected and covered, which I thought was quite interesting, considering you would have thought that they would have gone to cover her up, but instead she was doing her best to help out. So that puts a little change of the spin. The daughter may be a little stinker, but the mother's great.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, that's nice to hear that there's some heroes in all of this.
Yes.
So it was a sad time, and it still is a sad time. We're still all reeling from this. It's unfortunate beyond belief, but we're going to have to push ahead, aren't we? So what's happening with our numbers? What can we come to expect?
Well, what's really going on at this point in time is because everything deals with family type things. And one of the things that I talked to you about earlier today, anytime we deal with a month that deals with everything being perfection, everybody's trying to make it perfect, we also have issues with our pets and things of that nature. And I've had 5 clients that have lost their pets this month.
Oh, no.
There'll be illnesses, lost pets, things will go wrong, or issues will pop up about their pets or a neighbor's pet. But pets have been, like I said, 5 in 1 month. That's quite a bit. Usually they're outside of the fact somebody gets lost once in a while. Don't usually get too much on that. But it's all about we're trying to make things different. Getting things laid out for what's coming up next month, I think, is why we want everything perfect. I think we're going to get a little bit more of what's just taken place worldly next month. There's some legal things that'll be taking place and not comfortable things for the rest of us. We're going to be watching some secrets being made known, the good and the bad of. So I'd keep our fingers crossed that we hear the good secrets and not the bad ones.
Yes, I agree. Yeah. We want all the stuff that we should be told, right? The honesty has been missing, hasn't it? And that's part of what our show's about tonight.
That's right. And there has been a lack of honesty for quite some time.
For thousands of years, apparently. We are going to find that out tonight when we bring our guest on the air, Michael A. Cremo. He is a man of great courage, isn't he?
Yes, he is. Definitely.
Tremendous courage. He has taken on other archaeologists and historians and presented an alternate view of what our history really is. And he's outed a lot of them for covering things up. We're going to find out what's really going on tonight. Michael is going to tell us the truth, because the truth is right here on Supernatural Girls. So we're going to get to the bottom of a lot of things tonight with Michael Cremo. And his books are amazing. I mean, we've been reading, oh my God,
it is amazing.
Michael's books are great. Human Devolution. We devolved. We're going to find out how the hell that happened. So he's going to talk to us about that. And for paranormal news, I want to suggest everybody go to the Facebook page. We've been posting all kinds of cool stories. We have a monster bear apparition that was terrorizing people. We have, what's that? There was a gateway they discovered. Mm-hmm. This is a scientific discovery, a gateway between universes. So, I wonder who's traversing our universes, going from one to the other. Well, it's not us, but
I want to know who the gatekeeper is.
Yeah, the position of power. We want to know. Well, and I also have, for paranormal news tonight, I wanted to share a personal experience, because one of the things we have shared on the show and questioned our guests about is this. Alien abductions. They seem to occur without our free will. Now, we've been told over and over again we have free will on this planet. We can decide yes or no. So my question and your question to our guests in the past has always been, well, then what happens with our free will regarding these abductions? So why don't people have the right to say no? So here's what I learned. I was a dream analyst for over 25 years. Mm-hmm. So I pay attention to my dreams. And just the other night, I had a dream. And in this dream, somebody was asking me for a tissue sample. They said, we just want a little tissue sample. Now, whoever was asking me, it was someone I didn't know. They didn't look like aliens. But I thought, what a strange thing to ask me for. And I kept saying no, no, no. And they kept asking over and over again. And then I realized what this was. The aliens, in my opinion, the ETs and the interdimensionals know how to use the dreamscape to get to people. Ooh. So they visit you in your dreams like they were visiting me. And that's how they get around free will. Because they asked me, can we do this? If I hadn't recognized what they were, I might have said, sure. Mm-hmm. But in fact, most people are unconscious. They don't remember their dreams. They don't do their dream work. Naughty, naughty. And here's the result. So these aliens, in my opinion, and interdimensionals are getting permission in the dream world so they can do whatever they want. Once they have that permission, they can take whatever samples they want. It's a good reason to do dream work, everybody.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, because, this is not a war of bullets. This is not anything. You can't do anything with weaponry with these people, unless you're John Edmonds and you have a big sword. Remember him?
Yes,
His
for
samurai
sure.
sword came in handy. But most of us don't have access to that. We don't have the ability to use weapons like that. And so how do we fight against this? Well, this is how. The more conscious you become, the more aware you become when you're dreaming, that's your protection. Mm-hmm. So that's what to do, everybody. That's what to look for. And I have a dream book. It's on Amazon. It's very short, very sweet, just like, here's what you need to do to start remembering your dreams. Here's what you need to do to become more aware in your dreams. So go look it up. It's easy enough to download and get busy on it. This is your protection.
Oh, it makes good sense. Well,
yes.
The easy things are usually the hardest for us to get into doing, aren't they?
Well, yeah.
All we have to do is start making a list of what we put out.
But you know what? I'm seeing a lot of people that are incredibly lazy. And not our audience, of course, because our audience...
Of course not.
But a lot of people are lazy, and they don't want to put the time into keeping a dream journal or remembering their dreams. It's like too much trouble. They'd rather be on their iPhone, which you can write your dreams down on your iPhone, too, if you want. That's easy enough to do.
Speaking of that, next month, because it's a 7 Universal month, there's going to be a lot of dreaming going on. A lot.
Okay.
Big time. So get your paper ready, people.
That's right. That's right. And PK, you have some classes coming up.
Yes, I'm going to start teaching some additional numerology classes. I'll post them on my webpage, patriciakirkman.com, after the first week of June. And I'm going to be doing the Mystic Messenger Psychic Fair the 4th of June.
Excellent. So if you're in the Tucson area, you know where to go for the Psychic Fair. We'll announce it again so you don't miss it. And you'll also see it on PK's website. So all kinds of fun things to do to raise your awareness. You know, don't let yourself stay asleep. Wake up.
Or dream. One of the two.
Wake up in your dream. How's that?
Okay.
That's even better.
Yeah, I like
right?
that idea. That's a new switch.
Okay. So go to our Facebook page and give us a like. Follow us. Follow us on Twitter. We've got lots of things coming up, lots of things tonight you're going to be very excited to hear. So this book, Human Devolution, it's beautiful.
It is.
Beautiful. And it's filled with information that is going to rock your world. So we highly recommend you get that. Also, other books that Michael has written, Forbidden Archaeology. We're going to talk about some of that as well. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm going to read you a little bit about Michael because he's very impressive.
Yes, he is.
Okay. Yes. He is a research associate, and he specializes in the history and philosophy of science. He is a member of the World Archaeological Congress, the European Association of Archaeologists, the History of Science Society, and the Philosophy of Science Association. This man has taken on traditional history, and he's going to tell us the truth tonight. So, Michael Cremo, welcome to the show.
Good to be with the Supernatural Girls and everybody who's listening and watching.
Thank you. It's our pleasure to have you. Definitely. This is amazing what you've done. You've really outed a lot of things. Now, what got you interested in this?
Well, that may have something to do with the way that I was raised. You know, my father was an intelligence officer in the United States Air Force, so that meant a couple of things for me as I was growing up. One thing it meant is that our family was moving to a lot of different places around the world and around the United States. So one effect of that was that I came to understand there's more than one way to look at things. You know, I got exposed to a lot of different cultures and worldviews as I was growing up. And the one that most fascinated me was the spiritual worldview of ancient India. And eventually I became the disciple of a guru from India. And as part of that, I began studying the ancient Sanskrit writings of India, especially the historical and cosmological writings, which are called the Puranas. And therein, I learned many things that were quite different from anything I'd learned from my teachers in high school or university. One thing I learned from these ancient writings is that our human presence on this earth goes back many millions and millions of years, all the way back to the very beginnings of the history of life on earth. You know, from my teachers in school, I had always learned something quite different, namely that humans like us first appeared less than 200,000 years ago on this planet. Before that, there were no humans like us, just more primitive ape-like human ancestors. So I began to wonder how I should react to these writings, to the information that was in them, which is found not just in the ancient Sanskrit writings of India, but in most of the ancient wisdom traditions of the world. They all speak of a very ancient human presence on this planet. So I had to ask myself, is this mythology? Or is there perhaps some factual basis for it? So that's what got me looking into the history of archaeology. You know, if you look in the current textbooks, you're only going to find the discoveries that support the current dominant paradigm, the one that's prevalent in the scientific world today. But I decided I'm going to look beyond the textbooks, And here again, maybe there was some influence from my family background. I grew up among people in the intelligence services, diplomatic service, military service, and I could understand from a very young age that, yes, there is such a thing as secret knowledge. There are things going on in the world that most people simply aren't aware of. Maybe it's leaked from time to time, but in general, it's kept out of sight. So I decided, let me look beyond the textbooks. Let me look into the original scientific reports by archaeologists, geologists, paleontologists, and other scientists who are digging into the earth. And when I did that, I was amazed to find there were many scientists reporting discoveries of human bones, human artifacts, and human footprints going back many, many millions of years. So I collected all of those reports in a book I call Forbidden Archaeology. And, sometimes people ask, well, why forbidden? It's because it's outside the box in terms of mainstream thinking. And this evidence has been subjected to what I call a process of knowledge filtration. A scientific discipline is usually governed by some kind of paradigm, some set of beliefs and methods and conclusions that dominate that discipline. And reports of evidence that conform to that paradigm will pass through the knowledge filter very easily. But if you've got evidence that radically contradicts a dominant paradigm, it tends to be filtered out. And by that I mean it's ignored, it's dismissed, it's hidden away, sometimes even suppressed.
Well, it sounds like from your books that we've read that the archaeologists, some of them, were burying things just as fast as they were uncovering them. Some of these things, like you've just been talking about, that don't fit in to their view of what our history is.
Yeah, well, I could give you a couple of examples of that. As I said, I look into the history of archaeology, and some of the examples I give are from the earlier history and some from more recent times. One of the fascinating cases from the early history of archaeology is the California gold mine discoveries. In the 19th century, gold was discovered in California. Miners came from all over the world to get it, and they were digging tunnels into the sides of mountains like Table Mountain in the Sierra Nevada mountains near the town of Sonora in central California. And deep inside these tunnels, the miners were finding human bones and human artifacts. They were finding obsidian spear points, stone mortars and pestles. And what makes these things really interesting to me is they were found in layers of rock that modern geologists tell us are about 50 million years old, which is really quite astonishing. And these discoveries came to the attention of Dr. J.D. Whitney, who was the chief government geologist of California. So he went and investigated these cases, carefully studied the conditions under which the discoveries were made, and he wrote a massive report about them that was published by Harvard University in the year 1880. But we don't read about these discoveries in today's textbooks because of the process of knowledge filtration I was talking about. And one of the scientists most responsible for the knowledge filtering in this particular case was Dr. William Holmes, who was an anthropologist working at the Smithsonian Institution. And he said, or wrote, if Dr. Whitney had understood the theory of human evolution, he wouldn't have published that report. He wouldn't have come to those conclusions that humans had lived in these very ancient times. In other words, if the facts did not support the dominant theory, the facts should not have been published. They should just be cast into oblivion, forgotten, and basically that's what's happened. But some of the artifacts from the California gold mines are still in the collection of the Museum of Anthropology at the University of California at Berkeley. They're not displayed to the public. They're kept in a storage building several miles from the museum. But I did get permission from the directors of the museum to study and photograph them, and they are still there. I also went into the mountains of California, and I was able to relocate some of the old 19th century gold mining tunnels where these objects were originally discovered. So it should be possible to do more research there and uncover more of these things.
Absolutely.
But
they don't welcome that, do they? They don't welcome that with open arms. They're going to just try to bury it again.
Absolutely. And here's a case from the very recent history of archaeology. It may seem a little insignificant when I tell you what it is, but it illustrates how this knowledge filtering process operates. In 2016, just last year, archaeologists working at Olduvai Gorge in the country of Tanzania in East Africa found a small piece of bone. Actually, it was a finger bone, the bone of the finger here. Small bone. It was found in layers of rock 1,800,000 years old. The archaeologist who discovered it very carefully measured this bone. They did all kinds of measurements on it. Then they compared the measurements to the same bone, the same finger bone of all different species of apes, monkeys, ape men like Australopithecus and Homo habilis, and anatomically modern humans. And they found that this finger bone fit in the anatomically modern human group, and it was different from the same finger bone of any species of ape or monkey or ape man like Australopithecus or Homo habilis. But what they said in their scientific report was very interesting. They said, okay, we discovered this finger bone. It's exactly like that of an anatomically modern Homo sapiens, but we can't call it Homo sapiens because it was found in layers of rock 1,800,000 years old, so it would be too old. It just shows you how the psychology works. Sometimes scientists can be staring evidence for extreme human antiquity right in the eye. It's right in their hands. They're looking at it. It's human. It's found in layers of rock 1,800,000 years old, but they cannot admit it as evidence that humans existed that far in the past because it would completely upset their paradigm. There have been interesting psychological experiments that have been done. In the 1940s, some psychologists did some experiments with playing cards. What they did is they modified some cards in a deck. Say if you have a 6 of hearts, normally it would be red. They painted it black. Or if you have a 4 of spades, normally it would be black. They made it red. And they put a few of these altered cards in a deck. And then they would show the cards in the deck one after another to people, asking them if they could notice anything. And no one noticed that those cards didn't fit. And it's the same kind of principle operates in the scientific world. Sometimes scientists don't see what's really there in front of them. They see what they expect to see. They see what their paradigm allows them to see, even though it's staring them right in the face. Just like you could show the person the black six of hearts, they will see it as a normal card. They won't notice it as an anomaly. And you know, if this happened just once or twice, you know, maybe you could overlook it. But what I've shown in my book, Forbidden Archaeology, is this hasn't happened just once or twice. There are hundreds of these cases of human bones, human artifacts, and human footprints going back tens of millions, even hundreds of millions of years. And yeah, some people, we're hearing some noise outside on Venice
like
Boulevard. Okay, some
Emergency
people
vehicles.
well, what difference does it make whether human beings have been around a few hundred thousand?
Well, that's what I was going to ask. It's like, you know, what difference does it make? Why not just come out and tell the truth? What difference does it make? It's a big deal.
Well, I think the significance of this evidence is that it points to the need for new explanations of human origins. And the fact is that those alternative explanations generally involve something that goes beyond the material, that goes into the realm of what you would call, or some people would call, the paranormal, but which probably many of your viewers would consider to be the real normal. In other words, something that goes beyond materialistic, reductionistic kinds of scientific explanations, something that involves non-material principles, and they don't like that very much. You know,
Well, and
today,
they've also
most
destroyed
scientists-
things, haven't they?
Yeah.
I mean, they've also just actually destroyed. We've heard rumors, and we're hoping
Right.
you'll be able to tell us what you know about this. But we've heard rumors that even museums have been known to actually destroy things that were brought in that they feel didn't follow the rules of what they think happened. Is that true? Has that really happened?
Things like that do happen. Things do get destroyed. Sometimes it's due to war or civil disturbances. A lot of this is happening in the Middle East now, where archaeological monuments and museums are being looted and destroyed. But
That's terrible.
That's another thing. But what you're talking about is something that's maybe even more sinister. And sometimes objects do go missing from museums. I'll give one example. In my book, Forbidden Archaeology, one of the most extreme anomalies that I included in the book was some round metallic spheres that come from a mine in South Africa near a place called Ottosdal in the western Transvaal region. You know, these objects are 1 or 2 inches in diameter. The most interesting feature of them is the parallel grooves that go around the center of each object. So in my book, Forbidden Archaeology, there's a picture, a photograph of one of these objects with the grooves going around its equator. These
And
things
we're just gonna take a short break, so we're gonna hear more about these spheres and the parallel lines on them when we come back, because this is fascinating. We have so many questions for you, Michael. So everybody, stay tuned. We are speaking with Michael Cremo. He's the author of some very amazing books about our past, Human Devolution and Forbidden Archaeology, and more. You can find them all on Amazon.com. And if you have any questions for Michael, you can type them into the chat room. I'll be happy to ask them on your behalf. If you want to see us live, go to irnchat.com, go to the menu, and click on Tube. You'll be able to see us there. So, hang tight, everybody. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone, to Supernatural Girls Radio. I'm your host, Patricia Baker. I'm here with my co-host all the way from Tucson, PK, and our great guest tonight, Michael Cremo, with his fabulous books and incredible information, Human Devolution. You can't miss this book. Make sure to pick it up at Amazon. And Forbidden Archaeology. This stuff, like I said, will rock your world. Our history, we have been lied to. Is anybody surprised? But now you can hear much more about these little balls with parallel lines is where we left off, Michael. So tell us about this. What were these things?
Well, these are made of hematite, which is a naturally occurring type of iron ore. It's also a semi-precious stone. You can get hematite jewelry. But these round objects made of hematite come from a mine in South Africa near the town of Ottosdal in the western Transvaal region, as we were mentioning before the break. And what's really interesting about them is the parallel grooves that go around the center of each object, which suggests they were engraved by some kind of intelligent being who existed a long time ago. These metallic spheres are found in layers of rock about 2 billion, not million, but billion years old in this mine in South Africa. And once I went to South Africa, I met the chief mining engineer from this mine, and he showed me a whole block of mineral with these objects protruding.
It's time for some straight talk. You have their unlimited plan. So why do you keep running out of high-speed data? Never run out again with Straight Talk's new Ultimate Unlimited plan. Get all the 4G LTE data you want, all high speed, and all for just $55 a month on America's largest, most dependable 4G LTE networks, only from Straight Talk Wireless, only at Walmart.
Video typically streams at DVD quality. Please refer always to the latest terms and conditions of service at straighttalk.com.
From the block of mineral, kind of like raisins and raisin bread, and you could see the grooves going around the sides of the objects back into the solid rock. So it was very interesting. And in my book, Forbidden Archaeology, I included a photograph of one of these objects from South Africa. And they were also featured in a documentary called The Mysterious Origins of Man that was shown on NBC some years ago. And a television producer in the Netherlands, in Holland, saw them, and he got in touch with me, and he said he wanted to go to the museum where these things are kept in South Africa. It's the Natural History Museum in Klerksdorp, South Africa. And he asked me to put him in contact with the director of that museum. So I did that, because this producer wanted to go down there and film them himself. So the museum director told us that unfortunately the object the one that I showed a photograph of in my book, that object had been stolen from the museum. Now, these objects, according to some reports, had some very unusual properties. According to one report, which came from a tabloid newspaper, I have to say, but I don't think that everything published in a tabloid newspaper is necessarily untrue.
That's
but
right.
The report was that this object would rotate spontaneously in its display case in South Africa. And the museum director said the person who stole it was what he called a, quote, white witch. So anyways, I hope it's being put to some good use.
Let's hope. Gosh. Yeah,
but
no,
that's
one example
of an object that went missing from a museum, which is what you were asking me about before the break. And there are other examples of that, too. There's an interesting archaeological site in Southern California. It's on the way between Los Angeles and Las Vegas. It's out in the middle of the desert. The place is called Calico. It's called the Calico Archaeological Site. And it was discovered by an American archaeologist, a lady named Ruth D. Simpson. They sometimes just call her D. And Louis Leakey. She invited Louis Leakey, one of the most famous archaeologists in the world, to come to the site. And he was very impressed with the work that she was doing there. She was finding all kinds of stone tools in layers of rock about 300,000 years old, which is really kind of amazing because according to the current dominant archaeological paradigm, there were no humans of any kind in North America before 20,000 years ago. So to have this kind of evidence at 300,000 years was really pretty amazing. So this was in the 1960s and 1970s that they started this work. And after that, decades of work went on. And thousands of human artifacts were uncovered at this site, and they were placed in the collection of the San Bernardino County Museum in Redlands, California, I think it was. And a few years ago, new management took over the site, and the person who took over, the new director, was skeptical about these discoveries, even though they'd been endorsed by prominent archaeologists and other scientists. And this new director of the project caused the museum to throw out thousands of artifacts that have been collected at that site. So you've got kind of two things happening with museums. Sometimes things are going missing, and other times they're there, but you wouldn't even know about it unless you're someone like me who knows the history and is willing to dig in to the facts that are being subjected to what I call this process of knowledge filtration. So it does happen. But again, I think the main significance of this evidence for extreme human antiquity is it means we need new explanations of human origins. And those explanations tend to involve non-material principles. I kind of lay this out in my book, Human Devolution. I mean, most scientists today believe we're just machines made of matter. That's all there is to it. We're just machines made of molecules. You know, a British scientist named Richard Dawkins put it very nicely. He said, according to science, we are survival machines. We are robot vehicles blindly programmed to preserve the selfish molecules known as genes. And that's their definition of who we are and what we are. And I don't accept that. I think there's more to a human being than molecules. I think there's a subtle mental body that has some very unusual powers like remote viewing, psychokinesis, and things like that. And then beyond that, there is a conscious self that is completely non-material. It's beyond the body, beyond the brain, beyond the mind even. And that conscious self is the real essential part of our identity. That's what we really are, the conscious self. And that has an origin beyond the world of matter. So what I'm proposing is, as conscious beings, we do not evolve up from matter, as most scientists say. They would say matter is the only thing that exists. If you combine matter, if you combine molecules in the brain in a sufficiently complex way, they will generate what we call consciousness, but only temporarily. At the time of death, when the chemicals in the brain become disorganized, there's no more consciousness, no more mind, nothing like that. So I'm proposing something different. Matter does not produce consciousness. As conscious beings, we don't evolve up from matter. Rather, we devolve or come down from the level of pure consciousness or spirit. And if ideas like that were dominant in the education system, in the scientific institutions, we would have a completely different kind of human civilization, because our values, our goals, our objectives in life grow out of our sense of identity, how we identify ourselves. If we identify ourselves as machines made of matter in competition with each other for survival, then we're going to have some very materialistic goals, values, and objectives, and a corresponding set of cultural, financial, political, and social institutions, all based
because then
on
we
that.
would. Yes, we would be, again, where we are today, embracing violence and rather than all of the spiritual things that we could embrace and have freedom in that. Instead, we're enslaved by matter and how we perceive matter. So
I think
it makes sense what you're saying.
Right. And I think that, you were asking a little earlier, well, what is the reason for, the suppression of this alternative evidence? And I think that is the underlying reason, because if we start looking at alternatives, we're going to see that the alternatives involve non-material principles, which lead to different values, different kinds of institutions. If people were being instructed by their scientific elites, we are all beings of pure consciousness, what would our society be like? We'd be thinking, okay, I'm a being of pure consciousness, you're a being of pure consciousness, no need to divide ourselves into so many competing groups on the basis of superficial identification with different kinds of material identities. Hey, we're all part of the same family of beings of pure consciousness, and we should be putting most of our human energy into developing that resource of consciousness. And as far as our material needs are concerned, let's find the most simple, natural, and efficient, and fair, and equitable way to satisfy our material needs while putting most of our human energy into the real goal of life. It would be an entirely different kind of civilization. There would be different economic institutions, political institutions, social institutions, cultural institutions. It would be a completely different kind of world. But there are a lot of forces in this world that are invested in the current system that want to see people think the only goal of human life is to produce and consume more and more material things in competing groups.
Yes, that's true. And it leaves us with really nothing. It's kind of like mercury in your hand sliding around, and you can't ever really get a grip on it. So it is it's a terrible carrot in front of our faces. But when you were describing this way of that we did really devolve, and I think you're absolutely right about that, it made me feel relaxed. It was like I just wanted to take a breath and then, that feels so much better. It's so much better to come from that understanding, isn't it?
Doesn't it? Yes. I think people feel uncomfortable under the current paradigm, and there's a reason why they feel threatened, why they feel uncomfortable, why they feel full of anxiety and fear when confronted with the kinds of things that happen in a worldwide human civilization that is based primarily on these materialistic principles of ever-increasing material production and consumption in competing groups. I mean, even if people belong nominally to some religion, that just pray to God, help me produce and consume and triumph over others. If so, people feel uncomfortable with that. And I think
we all do to some extent.
The reason why I think people feel uncomfortable is because at root they understand, they have some maybe unconscious sort of awareness that I am a being of pure consciousness, so therefore why am I identifying with all kinds of ideas and concepts that are just putting me in anxiety, in fear, in confusion? So I think the reason, if we really were just machines made of molecules, we wouldn't feel any sense of dissatisfaction. We would just understand, well, that's it, that's the way it is. But I think the reason why people feel these things is because deep down inside, perhaps on an unconscious level, they have some kind of dim awareness that they're meant for something else.
Yes, I think that's terrific. Now, we've got a couple questions for you from the chat room, so I'm going to ask you these. Let me just get to them. This is from Tricia. Tricia would like to know, have you sought any government funding to support your projects, or is there a blacklisting of researchers who take on your viewpoints?
I haven't sought government funding. I'm not part of any mainstream educational or scientific institution. I've taken an independent position. I'm a member of a spiritual group, and they're supportive of what I do, so I'm grateful for that. But I think it's very difficult to do the kind of thing that I'm doing within a mainstream scientific or educational kind of institution. Nevertheless, I remember once I did get some funding, a travel grant from the National Science Foundation to go to an international scientific conference in Mexico City, where I presented a paper giving evidence that contradicts the Darwinian theory of evolution that's now so dominant in the scientific world. So I thought that was pretty interesting, that I once, as part of my application to go to a scientific conference, did get some minor funding from the National Science Foundation. That was
Wow.
kind of interesting.
That
But I
is.
think a lot of researchers in the alternative science field are supported by independent organizations or by their own income that they get from other sources or perhaps from publications and websites
Sure. Yeah.
and things like that. I think that is the situation
Yes.
now. And that's how modern science got its start. In Europe 5 or 6 centuries ago, everything was kind of controlled by the church. So the scientists were the outsiders and the ones who had to function any way they could with the support of private individuals or by their own means. But now that they've kind of taken over, they've kind of done the same thing they accused the church of having done several centuries ago. And they brand people as heretics, and that sort of thing happens.
It does.
Specific example.
Before you go on to that, let me just grab this sort of question, Michael, from the chat room, because after this we're going to have to take a little break, and then we'll come back. We want to talk about Bigfoot. We want to talk about extraterrestrials as a part of our experience on this planet. So this is from Neutron. Neutron says, is this description of being stuck in a bad system the same as the story when Yahweh took his turn to rule right after the flood and imposed for the first time to humans currency, slavery, and hierarchy lineage rules?
Yeah, I'm not a deep student of the Bible. I get a lot of inspiration from my studies in the ancient Sanskrit writings of India, which involve a cyclical concept of time. There's a cycle of ages, sort of like a cycle of cosmic seasons. You go from spring to summer to fall to winter. So ancient peoples were aware of larger cycles of time. They were called yugas in the ancient Sanskrit writings. And in the first yuga, it was an age of spiritual truth. There were no classes. People lived simply and naturally. Most people were engaged on a high level of spiritual consciousness and energy. They didn't have towns or cities or anything like that. In the next age, things began to degrade a little bit. They began to divide themselves into different social classes and live in cities and towns and have political divisions. But still, things were going on according to moral principles. But then later, you get into these heavy kinds of things that you were mentioning. So I think there are parallels in these different wisdom traditions. I think
you're right. There are. Yes.
And
there's definitely parallels.
There was this Garden of Eden type of existence, but after certain things happened, then people had to work very hard. Things like slavery came into being. And so, I think you find parallels in a lot of these wisdom traditions of a golden age that was followed by something else. But the way I'd look at it is, just because it's raining, you don't have to get wet. You can, even though the present society may be organized in a certain way, doesn't mean you have to go along with it in all respects. You can make a shelter for yourself and for others that you care about. That's possible.
Absolutely. Well, this is all so fascinating. We have barely scratched the surface here because there's so much information. So what we're going to do is we're going to take another short break, and we'll be coming back and talking about Bigfoot, extraterrestrials, and other anomalies. That's okay. We'll get you straightened out during the break, Michael, and stay tuned, everybody. We will be right back. Welcome back, everyone, to Supernatural Girls Radio. I'm your host, Patricia Baker. I'm here with PK from Tucson. And I wanted to let everybody know that you can also get a hold of Michael Cremo's books on his website, okay, which is Cremo.com. And they also have a limited time offer. So anyone who purchases the newest book, which is called My Science, My Religion, has the option of receiving a free Bhagavad Gita, as it is from the ancient Vedic literature of India. Very nice offer. So again, you can find that on Michael's website, which is Cremo.com. How about it? That's nice. So we are back on the air. We've got to, Michael, can you hear us okay now?
I can hear you, but your voices are coming out not through my headset, but through the speakers in my laptop.
Okay, as long as you can hear us, then
Right.
We'll fire some questions at you. Tell us the truth about Bigfoot. People have found evidence, have they not?
In my book, Forbidden Archaeology, I have an entire chapter called Evidence for Living Ape Men. Basically, when I look at the archaeological record, I see a different pattern than most scientists would see who are operating according to the orthodox paradigm of human evolution. They would see an evolutionary pattern where millions of years ago you have some primitive apes and monkeys, then those are followed by what we could call ape men, for lack of a simpler term. I mean, hominins is the technical scientific word for ape men. And then finally, about 200,000 years ago, you would see humans like us, anatomically modern Homo sapiens. But when I look at the archaeological record, I see there's evidence that humans like us existed in the very distant past, millions of years ago, and that we coexisted with primitive apes and monkeys and various kinds of hominins or ape men. And I think the same is still true today. I think even today, we're still coexisting on this planet with apes and monkeys and various kinds of ape men. And it's another field in which there's been a tremendous amount of knowledge filtration. Nevertheless, there are scientists who have reported evidence for living ape men. They call them by different names in different parts of the world. In North America, they call them Sasquatch or Bigfoot. In Central Asia, they call them the Almas. In the Himalayan regions, they call them the Yeti. There are different names for them in different parts of the world. And there's a tremendous amount of evidence for the fact that we are still coexisting with ape men and apes and monkeys as we have in the past. Now, there are researchers who have had paranormal experiences in connection with these ape man-like creatures. And in my studies of the ancient Sanskrit writings of India, I see something similar. The ancient Sanskrit writings of India describe that millions of years ago, there were, in fact, creatures with ape-like bodies, human-like intelligence, and paranormal powers like the ability to fly unaided through the sky, communicate telepathically, and things of that sort.
That is incredible. And so here we are today with people that claim to be in contact with Bigfoot, and I again see it. Some of them see Bigfoot as a very spiritual creature and more spirit than matter, and able to manipulate their vibration so they can move into and out of matter. So it's a very interesting concept that some of the researchers are bringing forth. And what about extraterrestrials? Do we have evidence archaeologically of extraterrestrials?
Well, according to the ancient Sanskrit writings of India, there are 400,000 human-like species scattered throughout the universe.
Wow.
So yes, I accept the existence of extraterrestrials. You know, you can go to India, there are cave temples that are very elaborately carved, and some of the carvings show spacecraft. They're called vimanas. And I have an expanded conception of what it means to be an extraterrestrial. I would say that as conscious beings, we're all extraterrestrials, because as conscious beings, none of us is from this level of reality. We're not from the world of matter. We're from some other region of the cosmos, some other dimension. You know, the Vedic cosmos is a multi-level cosmos where you have one level of the cosmos dominated by gross material elements and energies. That's the level where we find ourselves now. It's inhabited by creatures adapted to the conditions there. Beyond that, there's a more subtle realm of different intellectual and mental energies. It's inhabited by beings adapted to the conditions there. So there are extraterrestrial beings from that level. And then there's what I call the level of pure consciousness. And there are extraterrestrial beings from that level of reality. And on all those different levels, they have craft in which they can travel through the different levels and around the different levels. So there are all kinds of, I have an expanded conception of what it means to be an extraterrestrial. Some people, when they think of extraterrestrial, they think only of flesh and blood creatures like ourselves from some other planet. And I think such creatures do exist, but I don't think that's the end of what it means to be an extraterrestrial. I think you could also call them extra-dimensional beings, if you like.
Sure, that makes sense. Now, here's another question for you. Back to archaeology and the timeline. They would like to know, what is the timeline for the short-lived Cro-Magnon man?
It's time for some straight talk. You have their unlimited plan. So why do you keep running out of high-speed data? Never run out again with Straight Talk's new Ultimate Unlimited plan. Get all the 4G LTE data you want, all high speed, and all for just $55 a month on America's largest, most dependable 4G LTE networks, only from Straight Talk Wireless, only at Walmart.
Video typically streams at DVD quality. Please refer always to the latest terms and conditions of service at straighttalk.com.
Cro-Magnon is a type of anatomically modern human. They lived in Europe maybe around 40 or 50,000 years ago. And, that's just according to the mainstream paradigm. But I believe humans of the Cro-Magnon type, of the Homo sapiens type, have existed on Earth for many, many millions of years, and there's archaeological evidence for that. So, but according to the Orthodox paradigm, Cro-Magnon would be the type of anatomically modern human that existed in Europe 40 or 50,000 years ago. But as far as I'm concerned, there's evidence that humans of that type existed in Europe 4 million years ago, 20 million years ago, 30 million years ago. You know, there are anatomically modern human skeletons that were found in the 19th century by an Italian geologist named Giuseppe Ragazzoni at a place called Castanedolo in northern Italy. You know, these human skeletons were found in layers of rock 4 million years old. So I think the Homo sapien type goes very far back in time.
Yeah, it's incredible. 4 million years ago, not 400,000, 4 million. Well, let me ask you this too, because in your book, Human Devolution, you also reference some experiences and experiments that were done with psychic mediums, and they were successful.
Yeah.
But they were dismissed. So tell us more about that.
Well, it's part of the what we could call the forbidden physics, if you want to call it that. Say most high school students, when they study physics, they learn about the work of Marie and Pierre Curie. You know, they're very famous. They were a husband and wife. They were both physicists. They both won Nobel Prizes for their work in discovering radium. Every high school physics student learns about them. But what you don't read in the physics textbooks is that they were doing experiments with mediums. They were part of a group of 20 or 30 prominent European scientists who were doing such research in Paris early in the 20th century. One thing they did is a couple of years of research with an Italian medium named Eusapia Palladino. And this woman had some paranormal abilities. She had psychokinetic or mind over matter abilities. So they did experiments with this medium in the Psychology Institute in Paris early in the 20th century. And, you know, they had her one day, and, you know, she was sitting in a chair in the laboratory, and some of the scientists were holding her hands, some of the scientists were holding her feet, making sure she couldn't move at all, you know, to carry out any kind of trickery or anything. And in the middle of the laboratory, Pierre Curie said that in broad daylight, under perfect conditions of observation, a large table was floating about a meter, about 3 feet off the ground. And, you know, he was measuring it, how high it was floating. He was timing it, how long it was floating. And the entire group of scientists, including 5 Nobel Prize winners, including the Curies, they signed documents saying these things are absolutely true. And Pierre Curie said, we have to take things like this into account if we're going to have a complete picture of reality. And I agree with that. But because of this knowledge filtering process, this kind of evidence is absent from today's textbooks, and it's categorized. I mean, people don't even know about it. They don't know the real history of physics, the real history of science. If they did, what we're now calling the paranormal would be accepted as part of the normal world of physics. Yeah, I once was giving a lecture about this hidden history of physics at a university in Europe, and my audience was about 100 professors of physics and graduate students of physics. So I went through this whole hidden history of physics, including the work of the Curies. And one of the physicists came up to me later and he said, you know, by day I do plasma physics, you know, the physics of superheated gases. He said to me, but privately, I'm doing some experiments in telepathy. You know, I take a coin and I flip it. And my son, you know, is eight years old or something like that, is in another room, and my son has to guess whether it's heads or tails. And he said, my son is getting 80% correct. And he said,
high.
I would never tell this to any of my colleagues. You know, they would think I've just gone completely nuts.
And it's such a shame because we're missing out on this aspect of who we are. And there are people, you know,
absolutely.
that can do these things. Look at
and he
Uri
said,
Geller.
but I feel safe in talking to you about it. You know, so as I travel around the world, it's one of the things that I see that sometimes, you know, you may be looking at somebody, a scientist, and think they're completely orthodox in their views. But if you get to know them and they open up to you, you'll find they accept some of these things. I mean, another time I got invited to speak at the geology department of a major university in the United States. There was a professor of geology there. He invited me to come and talk about my book, Forbidden Archaeology. And I did it. I spoke in the geology department there to the professors of geology and the graduate students. But I was just curious. You know, I asked this man, why did you invite me? I mean, you look at the guy, you know, he's a full professor of geology in the science department of a major university. He's publishing in the mainstream scientific journals. He's authoring textbooks.
Yeah, why did he invite you?
Yeah.
Your competition, but he said, I heard you on Coast to Coast, which is one of the shows, late night shows. Yes. So you just look at the guy and you think completely orthodox, but late at night, you know, he's listening to a show like yours, and there's so many others, and he's getting fascinated by it. So he invited me to his house, and we were sitting having dinner, him and his wife and me. And she's also at the university. And then they start telling me about a UFO experience that they had where some kind of strange craft, you know, came over their house. You know, they live on the outskirts of the town. And you know, sometimes that's what I experience.
That
you know,
is so
meet
cool.
people like that who, if you just saw them, you'd never think.
You'd never think it. But here they take you by surprise, but obviously they feel safe with you, and they share these experiences. Now, I live for the day, Michael, when we can share these experiences in public without fear of being made fun of or put down or killed by the government or whatever. I mean, it would be
I think that's eventually going to happen because this is a sign. You know, it's like it shows that even within, you know, the educational and scientific establishment, there are people who are officially going along with things, but who inside have different ideas, and they share them with others just very, very carefully. Now, to me, that is a sign that eventually things have to change. When you've got people who are part of the establishment harboring different kinds of ideas and kind of sharing them secretly with each other and with people that they trust, I think eventually that's going to break out into the open. And what to speak of the fact that most people among the general public, according to Gallup surveys, claim to have had paranormal experiences, don't accept the mainstream scientific theories about human origins. You know, it's been shown that, so to me, these are all positive signs that despite the fact that people are going into these educational institutions that are controlled completely by the mainstream scientists, and they're leaving them not having been convinced. Mm-hmm. And the fact that even within the mainstream scientific circles, there are people who have other ideas, and even secretly, I think these are all signs that eventually there is going to be a paradigm shift. There's going to be some tipping point where it all adds up to a quick shift.
That's a great thing. I mean, we really, really hope for that, because it makes all of this so much easier. I mean, it's so much easier to talk about this. You know, part of the problem that we have encountered on this show, when people talk about seeing Bigfoot or seeing Dogman or seeing any of these other creatures, is they feel so isolated if they can only talk about it here on the show, or like you mentioned, tell a few trusted people. But at the same time, what if Dogman's kind of dangerous? We're definitely at a disadvantage if we don't accept that this person did in fact see something and have an experience with a creature or being, whatever you want to call them, that might in fact be threatening. So we have to, again, understand there are things out there. Maybe we don't want to accept that they're there because we get a little frightened, but they're there. People have seen them, and not just once. This has happened through centuries that people have reported this. So it would be wonderful to accept it, and then let's have another discussion, because once it's accepted, it's a totally different discussion, isn't it?
Can you imagine what you could build on then?
Yeah, exactly.
My goodness. Tremendous.
I think if the institutions, the social, political, financial institutions are going to change, the first thing that has to change is our understanding of who we are and where we are. And once that happens, then it becomes possible to make other kinds of social, political, economic arrangements. But the first step has to be some change in fundamental ideas about who we are and where we are.
And now, do you see that happening kind of as a shift in consciousness through our population? Because we know it's not going to come from our institutions, from our governments and places where there are strongholds of the past, that they were so addicted to wanting us to believe the past as they see it. So do you see it more like consciousness shifting and hundreds of thousands or millions of people? Is that where it's going to come from?
No, that's already happening. I mean, surveys have shown, most people in the United States don't accept that we evolved from apes. I mean, they may have some other ideas that I don't necessarily agree with, but at least they're not accepting the mainstream scientific ideas about these things. I think at least 20 to 25% of the American people claim to believe in reincarnation and have had out-of-body experiences and things like that. So I think the general public is there already.
They're all waking up.
It's just a question of when institutions are going to...
Yeah, they'll have to catch up to the rest of us, right?
It's like the
Well,
overthrow
look,
of communism. Some people thought it was going to be there forever, and right up to the last moment, the people who were imposing that system continued to impose it, even though the people had changed, and even members of their own leadership group had developed different ideas.
It's exciting to be a part of the change, and Michael, you are at the forefront of it, and we thank you so much for coming on the show tonight and for sharing your work with us. Everybody be sure to go to Michael's website, get his books, mcremo.com, that's his website, or go to amazon.com. Don't miss out. This is a big consciousness shift. Be a part of it. And we'll be back next week with Scalar Energy. Tom Palladino. We're going to find out what Scalar can change for you. Be sure to tune in next week, and we will see you on the Blue Highway. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
It's time for some straight talk. You have their unlimited plan. So why do you keep running out of high-speed data? Never run out again with Straight Talk's new Ultimate Unlimited plan. Get all the 4G LTE data you want, all high speed, and all for just $55 a month on America's largest, most dependable 4G LTE networks, only from Straight Talk Wireless, only at Walmart.
Video typically streams at DVD quality. Please refer always to the latest terms and conditions of service at straighttalk.com.